feel, for the entire humanity, like this day is a very significant day, mother's final arrival and settling on the land of Bharata. Much before even mother would have thought about her coming and settling here, Sri Aurobindo had already given an invitation to the Divine Mother to come and settle when he writes in his Bhavani Bharati. So he says that Tiram Vasarye Hriday Bharatanam. Come, O Divine Mother, settle in the heart of India, heart of every Indian. Even in the Durga Stotra, she says that come, we will never do the Visarjanam of a use. What a powerful invitation. That let this life become an anavachinna Durga Puja, uninterrupted pujanam of the Divine Mother. And then come, we will never do the Visarjanam again, that we will never leave you. And these were the powerful prayers, perhaps, which, like made this day possible. And mother's association with the Gita, like how Gita saved her from many, uh, situations that she faced in her life and that she describes. And we are talking about this day, the another significance of this day, and then we are talking about this topic is in a situation when the whole world is going through a very difficult phase of time, the entire humanity. There's so much of fear, so much of anxiety, so much of, you know, uh, pain, suffering, afflictions all around. Wherever you look, everyday news, every day, whatever is happening to ours, we are not left with any negative, all kinds of negative thoughts, all kinds of negative news, all kinds of terrible news, in fact, we are filled in with. So sometimes it's very, very difficult even to breathe, to bear such news. Our near dear ones, everyone is suffering. Everyone is, every day you hear some deaths happening, and that also creates much fear. And how do we tackle this? This also is a part of our life, and we will discuss the Vishwarupa Darshanam, this vision of the time spirit, the universal form of the Lord, in the context of what the world is facing today. Why is this destruction happening? And one of the very important scenes that we see in the Vishwarupa Darshana is where Krishna himself says, when Arjuna is seeing the whole destruction of the world, the Rudra's destruction, the Shiva's Tandava, the Kali's destruction, all around, every destruction he sees, and he becomes terrified. He has a lot of fear, and then he prays again for the Lord to withdraw that form and then appear before him in his benevolent form, because it's very, very unbearable for him to see with this destruction. Why this destruction happens? And Krishna himself says that kalosmi loka kshayakrit pravruddho lokan samahartumiha pravruddha, that I am the destroyer, the time spirit, the destroyer. To take, to destroy the entire world, I am here. Why does he does this? Why does he do this destruction? And today we see that. Maybe that's a simple description in some scripture, in that foundation text of Sanatana Dharma, the Gita, a very simple description of this destruction. Sometimes we read it and we visualize it. What could have been this destruction? But today we experience the destruction as if the whole world is going to destroy. We don't know when it is going to end. This very question comes whether there is an end to this situation or not. When everything was, settled as if, and then again the waves after waves which are coming with much intensity and creating more fear. why this destruction happens time to time. What is the way out? What should be our attitude in this? We can read the entire chapter, chapter 11, what happened, what is the whole description, that what Arjuna sees, and then how he prays. But what is most important is what is the kind of practical lesson that we can learn from that chapter and then make it applicable to our life in such situation. Can we discuss that? So this is what I, constantly coming to my mind, that in this situation, what is the kind of lesson that we can learn from this Vishwarupa Darshana? What is the take home from here? So then practically it becomes possible for all of us to gain certain strength and then apply what Krishna demands from Arjuna, or what happened by this whole scene of Vishwarupa Darshana. Arjuna sees on one side that everything that is there in the creation is all in that single form. It's all in one and one in all. The entire universe is in this form. He feels happy. He never thought that Krishna would appear in such form, because he had a very different relationship with Krishna. That's what he describes later when he sees his terrible form. He says, like Sakheti Matva Prasabham Yaduktam. I've always considered you as my intimate friend. I have joked with you. I have sat with you. I have eaten with you. I have cracked jokes with you. I never thought that, like my friend whom I loved so much, whom I have poked, with whom I have sat, I have eaten, he is this terrible form, this Loka Kshayakaraka Krishna, this Kala. He never thought of that. That is why he constantly praying that come back, withdraw this form and then come back to that benevolent form. I want to see you in that form of friend. There also is a lesson that how do we, you know, deal with the divine. On one side, divine is the destructive, the lokakshayakrit. On another side, the kind of love that he has for all of us. On one side, we see this entire creation is within him. On another side, we see that he himself within us, within every one of us, as our friend, our comrade, our beloved, helping us in every manner. Sri Aurobindo, I mean, like one can read commentaries after commentaries, the ancient commentaries or the new commentaries, but nothing truly matches with the way Sri Aurobindo describes this whole Vishwarupa Darshana. The two chapters that he has dedicated in the essays on the Gita looks at this whole vision from various angles. And while talking about this destruction, which is very much necessary, sometimes we see that why things are happening. He says at one place that this destruction is not something which comes, you know, in steps, that first you have creation and then the creation is sustained and then comes destruction. It doesn't happen step by step. He says that this destruction, what Sri Krishna says, that kalosmi loka kshayakrut prabuddhalo lokan samahartamiha pravritta. So I am the destroyer of beings. It doesn't mean either that he is the time spirit alone and that the whole essence of the time spirit is destruction. This is what one finds in various commentaries, that by this single expression, kalosmi loka kshayakrut pravriddha, that the time spirit is only the destruction. Sri Aurobindo said, but it is this which is the present will of his workings, pravritti, that he wills to do that, and nothing can stand before the will of the Supreme. And Sri Aurobindo very beautifully describes it, saying the destruction is always a simultaneous or alternate element which keeps pace with creation, and it is by destroying and renewing that the master of life does his long work of preservation. Even the preservation is not possible without destroying, and it is a simultaneous process. So he says that destruction is always a simultaneous or alternate element which keeps pace with the creation. What we know as Srishti, Sthiti, and Pralaya, all the three are a simultaneous process. One cannot be without the other two. The Srishti can never happen without Sthiti and Pralaya. The Sthiti can never happen without Srishti and Pralaya. The Pralaya is not alone without Srishti and Sthiti. So, this whole destruction that we see all around is a part of the creation. This renewal is very much necessary for the new consciousness to take over the humanity. What is the kind of lessons that we're learning from this destruction happening all around? We need to ponder over that. We need to contemplate on that. Why is it happening? We see that the kind of fragmented lives that the humanity is living, from micro to nano living, where has that community living, where has that unity gone? We have forgotten that oneness, that unity of consciousness, and we live a fragmented life, divided into many parts. In this single life, we live many lives, disconnected lives. We have no connection. Our thoughts are disconnected. Our emotions are disconnected. All our physical movements are disconnected. There's no harmonious moving of any aspect of life. We move, we live in the most outer form of ourselves, the projected self, disintegrated life. And this disintegration and disharmony is the very cause of all the different crises that the humanity is facing, whether it is at the individual level or at the collective level. We talk about environmental pollution, we talk about globalization, we talk about global warming, we talk about water crisis, we talk about the sound pollution, we talk about all kinds of pollution crisis, environmental crisis. And we feel that the humanity has the solution. It does. The many environmental scientists you talk about, like how to preserve the environment, how to conserve it, what is the solution, and the kind of solutions the environmental scientists speak, it's all superficial. By merely planting trees or following any kinds of environmental conservation policy, that environment cannot be protected. What we see as the crisis in the nature is just an outer expression of what kind of pollution that the humanity is carrying within himself.
Yes.
Sri Aurobindo has a very beautiful, expression where he says, "The heavens' joys would have been Earth's if Earth was pure. If Earth were pure." Where is that purity? We live such impure life at every level of the physical impurity, the emotional, sensational, vital impurity, the mental, psychological impurity. Even how do we pollute our own spiritual life in the name of spirituality? What kind of impurity, what kind of pollution we do bring into the world of spirituality, into the realm of spirituality. Now it is all unbearable for the new consciousness which Sri Aurobindo and the mother have worked out and then brought and then fixed on the earth. So the humanity has to prepare itself to obey the laws of this new consciousness, the command of this new consciousness. And the mother has said categorically at many places that, like if humanity is not ready, it will be enforced, it will be forced upon the humanity. If it doesn't collaborate, what does she mean by this collaboration? This collaboration is a greater preparation at the individual level. How do we allow this divine, this new consciousness to manifest within ourselves? How do we integrate? How do we bring that harmony? How do we bring that beauty into every aspect of life? How do we bring that oneness and unity? This is the lesson that we will learn from the Vishwarupa Darshanam, the one in all and all in one. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyevanu Sarvabhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijugupsate. There's so much of hatredness, there's so much of enmity, there's so much of dvesha everywhere, so much of greed, so much of possessiveness. Are, I mean, are these not the cause of destruction? We forget that. When the destruction comes, we put these questions like why this destruction is happening. But we keep forgetting what we should nurture within ourselves, so then we can realize this unity of consciousness, we can establish this oneness, we can see all in one and one in all. Sarvabhuteshu chatmanam atmanyeva sarvabhutani. We forget that. We become so possessive, we become so greedy. We nourish all that emerges from the lower nature. We open all our doors to that. That also is the divine creation. Yet, the divine himself has asked us many times what to choose, what not to choose. Everything is divine. Even the Rakshasas, Asuras, Yakshas, Gandharvas, Manushas, everything that is there in the creation, all is divine. Yet, which aspect of the divine has to grow within our consciousness? So then the creation is maintained, sustained, preserved in the right way. We need to nourish that. The ancient seers and sages, the rishis, they talked about apyayana. Apyayana means nourishing and flourishing all the divine qualities within ourselves, so then the consciousness can expand. Just imagine, this Vishwarupa Darshan was necessary for bringing Arjuna back to his normal state, back to reminding him, bringing him back, giving him this knowledge that he has to be well settled within himself and realize his own swabhav and swadharma, and then act as per the divine will,
Yeah.
identifying his own individual will with the divine will. Ultimately, it is the divine will which has to prevail. This he becomes convinced after seeing the Vishwarupa. Just take out the Vishwarupa Darshanam and then take rest of the Jnanam that Krishna has given, that would not have been convincing for Arjuna to get rid of entirely from the moha which affected him. Just take out that whole chapter and then look at Arjuna's, position. It is by seeing, it is having the pratyaksha darshana of that, he realizes that ultimately it is the divine will which he has to obey. There's no other choice. This is where Krishna reminds him after showing him that, like, why do you, Arjuna, why do you think that you are going to kill, still carrying this kartrutva bhava, the sense of doership, that you are going to kill? Because that is what was affecting Arjuna. That he is going to kill his own people, his putra, pautra, pitamaha, pita, all his near and dear ones. This is where he was emotionally, he broke emotionally, he collapsed. And then we come back to the first chapter, where, second chapter of the Gita, where Arjuna confesses why was he affected and what was affecting his consciousness. Karpanya doshopahata swabhava pruchhami tvam dharma sammudha cheta. And this karpanya dosha indeed is the very cause of every crisis that the humanity is facing at individual and collective level. All narrowness of consciousness, which emerge from all kinds of disintegration, division, lack of this oneness and unity of consciousness. And this is where the entire teaching of the Gita is leading us step by step. How do we become free from this disintegration, this disharmony, and then be well settled within ourselves in that unity of consciousness, in that oneness, that ekatva, that equanimity, that samatva. So much so that in the Gita you have this expression that samatvam yoga uchyate. The entire yoga of the Gita is just reduced to this one word, samatva. And when we lose that samatva, this is what again you find the description in chapter 2, where Krishna says to Arjuna that Vishame samupasthita, in this situation, critical situation where everyone has lost that sense of that state of equanimity. Merely giving this teaching to Arjuna by various examples or by means of injunctions, commandments, definitely helped Arjuna to come back to the real state to some extent, but the Vishwarupa Darshana had a grand impact on his consciousness, where with folded hands he prays to the Lord that yes, he realizes that it is becoming the nimitta matram, what Krishna says in the Vishwarupa Darshan Yoga. Nimitta matram bhava sabya sachin. Why do you think that you are going to kill? Because they are all killed by me. This whole story has happened long back. That is the power of the Supreme, that he had worked out the whole thing much before. What is going to happen is just a dramatization of what happened long back. In the divine scheme, the whole story has happened. Even today, if we look at that, we see that things are happening all around in this manner. We don't know. It must have happened long back in the divine scheme. It is just materializing in the present state or in the present manner. So he says that don't run away or don't even decide that you are not going to fight. Prakriti stvam niyukshati. You will be forced to follow your swabhava and swadharma. The Prakriti will be behind you, or Prakriti will force you to follow your swabhava and swadharma and then act out as per that. But it is not merely the Prakriti which forces. Behind the working of the Prakriti is the will of the Supreme, is the commandment, is the consent of the Supreme. So it is that which comes out very clearly in the Vishwarupa Darshana Yoga. Therefore, let me read out few passages from Sri Aurobindo, his essays on the Gita, and then we can discuss on the basis of that. So when we see this terrible form that is described in the Gita, so Sri Aurobindo says that from the first words there comes this suggestion that the hidden truth behind these terrifying forms is a reassuring, a heartening, and a delightful truth. There is something that makes the heart of the world to rejoice and take pleasure in the name and the nearness to the divine. Though he is in his terrible form, though he is the Kala Loka Kshayakrit, yet within him that this world, the universal love and compassion of the divine. Even looking at that compassionate Lord, that friend, that is also a part of the Vishwarupa Darshana. So the world is rejoicing. Everyone is feeling happy seeing that part. So Sri Aurobindo says there is something that makes the heart of the world to rejoice and take pleasure in the name of the nearness of the divine. It is the profound sense of that which makes us see in the dark face of Kali the face of the mother, and to perceive, even in the midst of destruction, of protecting arms of the friend of creatures, in the midst of evil and the presence of a pure, unalterable benignity, and in the midst of death, the master of immortality. Can we draw some lesson from these lines of Sri Aurobindo to help us in this pandemic situation? In this situation where the destruction is happening all around, so much of suffering and affliction and fear and anxiety, all these things which are happening all around. You see that in the midst of destruction, there is this protecting arms of the friend of creature to constantly. So therefore, like he says, Mam Anusmaran, that remember me, keep me with you. Sri Aurobindo says that all those who keep the God in their heart are safe. From the terror of the king of the divine action, the Rakshasas, the fierce giant powers of darkness, flee destroyed, defeated, overpowered. But the Siddhas, but the complete and perfect who know, sing the names of the immortal, and live in the truth of his being, bow down before every form of him, and know what every form enshrines and signifies. Nothing has a real need to fear except that which is to be destroyed, the evil, the ignorance, the wailers in night, the Rakshas's power, all the movement and the action of Rudra, the terrible, is towards perfection and divine light and completeness. Even the terrible situation which is happening, there is hope in that, much rays of hope in that, a new creation, hope of a new creation. How the new consciousness is working out for its own manifestation in every realm of human life. So therefore he says all the movement and action of Rudra, the destroyer, the terrible, is towards perfection and the divine light and the completeness. For this spirit, this divine is only in outward form the destroyer. Time who undoes all these finite forms, but in himself, he is the infinite, the master of the cosmic Godheads, in whom the world and all its action are securely seated. He is the original and ever originating creator, one greater than the figure of the creative power called Brahma, which he shows to us in the form of things as one aspect of his trinity, creation, checkered by the balance of preservation and destruction. The real divine creation is eternal. It is the infinite manifested sempiternally in finite things. The Spirit who conceals and reveals Himself forever in His innumerable infinity of souls and in the wonder of their actions and in the beauty of their forms. He is the eternal, immutable. He is the dual appearance of is and is not, of the manifest and the never manifested of things that were and seem to be no more, are and appear doomed to perish, shall be and shall pass. But what he is beyond all these is that, the Supreme, who holds all things mutable in the single eternity of a time to which all is ever present. He possesses his immutable self in a timeless eternity of which time and creation are an ever extending figure. This is the truth of him in which all is reconciled, a harmony of simultaneous and interdependent truths start from and amount to one that is real. It is the truth of the Supreme Soul, of whose supreme nature the world is a derivation and an inferior figure of that infinite, of the Ancient of Days, who forever presides over the long evolution of time, of the original Godhead of whom gods and men and all living creatures are the children, the powers, the souls, spiritually justified in their being by his truth of existence, of the knowers who develops in man the knowledge of himself and world and God. And Sri Aurobindo goes on describing this eternal spirit, this time spirit, and the various nature of that. But what is the highest significance of this? What is the lesson in this Vishwarupa Darshana that the humanity has to draw, and then what has to be applied practically in the life of us, so then we become more and more conscious of that eternal spirit, that time spirit within ourselves, and then allow it to grow within ourselves to give us strength to prepare us for that greater collaboration, what mother speaks of collaborating. So then this new world which is born, we become a true member of that world, facilitating the manifestation of all that is needed for the betterment of moving forward of that world. Sri Aurobindo in another passage connected with this, he says, the highest way appointed for him. So this is the lesson that we can learn from this Vishwarupa Darshana. The highest way appointed for him is for Arjuna, is to carry out the will of God. But in order to carry out the will of the God, what we need to possess within ourselves. The one thing which is very much necessary is to become free from the separative ego sense, which takes hold of our outer life, our
Yes.
projected self. So, Arjuna, Krishna demands from the Arjuna, the divine demands that one has to become free from that egocentric, that separative ego sense, without egoism.
Yes, yes,
And it
yes.
is that which helps to develop this sense of instrumentality. That one is not a doer, one is not a karta, one is just an instrument through whom the things happen. So Sri Aurobindo says the highest way appointed for him is to carry out the will of the God without egoism, as the human occasion and instrument of that which he sees to be decreed, with a constant supporting memory of the Godhead in himself and man. That's why Krishna says to Arjuna that Tasmat Sarveshu Kaleshu Mam Anusmara Yudhyacha. That fight, be in the battlefield like a hero warrior. But there should not be a single moment when you have forgotten me, and when you have forgotten me, I will pass out things through you. Therefore, this Satata Smaran, the constant remembrance of the divine, Mam Anusmaran, and in whatever ways are appointed for him by the Lord of his nature. Nimitta matram bhava sabhyasache. He will not cherish personal enmity, anger, hatred, egoistic desire, and passion, will not hasten towards strife or lust after violence and destruction like the fierce Asura, but he will do his work, Loka Sangrahaya. And this is again the lesson from here that we learn from the Gita. The Gita, many people say that Gita preaches violence because it is all about destruction, all about bloodshed, all about killing the enemies. And how beautifully Sri Aurobindo says that this is what Krishna demands from Arjuna, that while killing your enemies, you should not have any personal enmity. You should not have anger within you. You should not have hatredness within you. You should not be led by your egoistic desire and passion. You should not have any sense of violence, like you should not behave like an asura who kills with violence. The only thing that Arjuna has to carry within himself while killing the enemies is Loka Sangrahaya, for the sake of the world, for the sake of a greater purpose. He says, kill your enemies with love. Develop that universal love and compassion within yourself. Enemies have to be uprooted because this is necessary. This destruction is necessary for the new creation. Beyond the action, he will look towards that to which it leads, that for which he is worrying. For God, the time spirit does not destroy for the sake of destruction. This is another very important line from Sri Aurobindo. He says, for God, the time spirit does not destroy for the sake of destruction, but to make the ways clear in the cyclic process for a greater rule and a progressing manifestation, Rajyam Samruddham, for a better kingdom, for a better world. He will accept in its deeper sense, which the superficial mind does not see. That's what happens to every one of us. We don't see our superficial mind because we live mostly in our outer self, led by our separative ego sense. in our projected self. So we don't see the greatness of the struggle, the glory of the victory, if need be, the glory of the victory which comes masked as a defeat. It seems that it is a defeat, it seems that it is suffering, it is affliction, it is painful, it is destruction, but it comes masked as defeat and lead man too in the enjoyment of his opulent kingdom. Rajyam Samruddham. Not appalled by the face of the destroyer, he will see within it the eternal spirit imperishable in all these perishing bodies, and behind it the face of the charioteer, the leader of man, the friend of all creatures. Suhridam Sarvabhutana, this formidable world form, once seen and acknowledged, is to that reassuring truth that the rest, Sri Aurobindo says that in the Gita, what we see in the rest of the chapters, he says it is to that reassuring truth that the rest of the chapter is directed. It discloses in the end a more intimate face and the body of the eternal. And it is this that we need to carry while contemplating on the teaching of the Gita, while contemplating on this Vishwarupa Darshana. Ultimately, we have to identify our individual will with the divine will and then allow it to manifest and work out its own will through us. And then we put ourselves before the eternal, before the Lord as nimitta, with that utter plasticity. That is why at the end, Sri Krishna says to Arjuna that Manmana bhava madbhakta madhyaji mam namaskuru sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam saranam braja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma sucha. So remain in that state of utter plasticity, that complete openness for the divine to work out. And in such situations, especially the present situation, if we can remain in that state of plasticity, that state of openness, that state of namas, that state of saranapannata, and satata smaranashilata, constant remembrance of the divine, and then keeping the divine with us as our friend, our intimate friend, not just the friend of one individual, but Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam, the friend of all. There lies the solution to all the problems that we keep facing now and then in our life. So, with these words, I end my talk. If there are questions, we will discuss about that.
Thank you, Sampadananda. Anyone wants to ask any question?
If nobody else has, I'll ask one question, Vijay.
Sure.
So, Sampada, when you were saying that this destruction was in fact to usher in a better age, I was trying to reconcile it with this whole idea that essentially the Kurukshetra war happens, in fact, between the Dwapara Yuga and the Kali Yuga. So they're actually going to a worse age. So, can you please shed some light on that, like what that means?
See, if we look at the whole Yuga concept from Sri Aurobindo's point of view, so this something comes after something is not the right understanding of the Yuga. So the Yuga, there is no pure Kali, pure Dvapara, pure Satya, pure Treta. All the four Yugas live within every Yuga. So what is spoken is that even in the Kali, now suppose when I just like explain you. Suppose we take this mathematical calculation of the yugas as we have understood normally based on the Puranic description, that Kali Yuga is for so many years and then Kali Yuga ends, then Dwapara comes, then Treta comes, or then the Satya Yuga comes. It doesn't happen in that way. So Sri Aurobindo explains that this yuga is like Satya is, like attaining to the peak, a certain peak, summit, which is a certain perfection which is realized by a uh, group of leaders, you can say, who are leading the humanity. There has been no age, even in the Satya Yuga also, what is called Satya, there has been no age where the entire humanity was perfected. It keeps on perfecting itself. So when we say Satya, it is attaining to a certain state of perfection, that the humanity has achieved certain state of perfection, and which can be seen as a peak, like the Veda says, Sanuhu Sanum. And when we reach one peak, there is another perfection which is waiting to be realized, that the other peak is visible. Unless and until we arrive at one peak, the other peak is not visible. And there is no end to perfection. And there is no direct flight from one peak to the other peak. One has to go through all the ups and downs, perfecting oneself, preparing oneself for the further realization. So that was necessary for uh, teaching the humanity of that age how to prepare for the next perfection to be realized. So this is how I look at it from Sri Aurobindo's point of view.
There is a one comment, Sampada. There's a question in that is from Uttaradi, that Arjuna kept Krishna as a friend. So should we keep the divine as a friend?
Yes, well, that's the best way of being with the divine.
And I have one question. So in the talk, to smaran all the time and you will be safe. This safe, the word is not reconciled in our daily life, because we see people who are remembering Lord in whichever form they choose to, but nonetheless they have left us, call it in this pandemic or otherwise. So what is the definition of safe when you remember the Lord?
Hmm. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that like we should not remember, because all those who remembered who left. So it has to do with the soul's evolution. It doesn't matter when it lives, but what has been its evolutionary journey, how it is going to help in this whole progressive evolution of the Atman.
Mhm.
So living is that today we say death has something terrible,
Yes.
but if you look at the ancient seers and sages, death was to be celebrated. Death was seen as a mahotsava, that it is something for the betterment, because it is moved forward. There is no all those who have not kept the divine with them, what would happen to their evolutionary journey? It will be taken care of by the nature, as Sri Aurobindo speaks of these two evolutionary journey. One is of the nature's evolution, and then one is the process, the methodized process of the like the yoga, etc., which accelerates this whole process of progressive evolution. So if we look at from the progressive evolutionary journey of the Atman, so these questions will not come. They're maybe they're not safe from the outward point of view, but inwardly, definitely there is the divine help, divine strength for the further progression of the Atman.
Thank you. Uh,
Thank you so much. I have a question. Um, reading Sri Aurobindo, the Mother, I came to the conclusion that it's impossible for us to get to this realization, and you just underlined our fractionate understanding of the world. So having this plasticity seems like unachievable goal, and at the same time, what I feel when I open my heart to the Mother and just let her work in me. However, I don't understand how it works, and I don't want to understand how it works. I just question, I guess, always is that how well we can be plastic and open, and how fidel we can be of caring mother in our heart, and seeing divine as a mother, as a lover, as a friend, as a servant. And we have so many examples of Champaklau and all you. So just maybe a little bit more guidance of how to keep her in here.
See what happens, like we should not give any importance to the consequences of what is happening in the sadhana. This is a question which keeps bothering many people also, like I remain plastic or I open to the divine, I keep praying, but what happens? What happens is beyond our understanding unless and until we reach to that stage. So that is why our only responsibility is to keep ourselves open to the divine. Then a stage will come when this realization will be given to us that what has happened. So most of the times we see certain events in our life. When that event takes place, we say that, oh, that was a blessing for me. But unless something happens, we see that why things are happening in this manner with me. What did I do? I'm such a nice person, I'm devoted to God, I'm selfless, but all these things keep happening with me. We do not understand the divine's way of working. Whatever happens, so therefore, whatever happens, good or bad, we have to take it as we have to feel the hand of the divine behind it. And forgetting this question that what is happening, when something good is going to happen to me, what is the result of my sadhana? That is what is never expected from a seeker. And there are many examples also, like we see, like the sadhaks have asked Sri Aurobindo and the mother, like, I am here for 30 years, 40 years, 25 years, 20 years. What is happening? I don't see any growth in me. They have answered, because the answer cannot be same for everyone. Depending upon each one's growth or need, the master and the mother, they have answered separately. To someone they say that, okay, you say that you are here for so many years, but what do you do while brushing your teeth? What do you do while you are on the loo? Do you remember me? And mother gives a very significant focus on the constant remembrance of the divine. Every there should not be even a single breath in which we have not remembered or kept the divine in our memory. So that is what keeps us connecting. That's what mother says, living one life. When that happens, we live just one life in the midst of so many things that we do in life. If we miss that connection, then in the midst of all these things, we don't live one life, but we live so many thousands of lives, all fragmented, disconnected, disintegrated. There is no oneness, there is no samatva. And then we lose the whole beauty of life, beauty of living. Life becomes terrible. We are expected to live a life beautiful.
I think there is a hand raised. Girish Master, do you have a question you want to ask?
I think he's on mute.
Yeah.
Hey, Vivek,
Yes.
can I say a scientist's perspective on this sloka that we heard? You know, during Second World War,
Yes.
America had developed a nuclear bomb, and the chief scientist and the project manager was Dr. Robert Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was a professor of physics at Princeton University. So when he tasted, the Oppenheimer was attracted by Indian scriptures. He had learned Sanskrit language, was reading Upanishads and Gitas in Sanskrit. So when he was tasting the bomb, he took Gita in his hand and he recited 2 slokas from this 11th chapter. One was what Sanjay says, you know, Divi Surya Sahasresu Bhavedu Pada Uttita Yadi Bas Syad Basastasya Mahatmana. He says, Lord, you know, I'm splitting this atom and I see the light. This is your light that I'm witnessing. What Sanjay and Arjun witnessed in Vishwarup Darshan. Second slok that he recited is what you spoke on. You know, Kalosmi Lok Sayakrut Pravruddha, Lokan Samahartami Pravruddha. So he says, Lord, I see this energy coming out, splitting the atom. You talk about your destructive power. I see your destructive power in splitting the atom. So this is what Robert Oppenheimer said.
Yeah.
Thank you, Devendra. Girish Masa, do you want to unmute yourself? Because you are on mute.
Or maybe Vivekji, can you unmute everybody from your side? Is there a way to do it? Like,
That's what I'm trying to find. I don't think so. I don't think I can, I mean, I can't unmute.
wow, okay. I think his video is also gone now.
Yeah. Maybe connecting. So it's okay.
Right.
So thank you, Sampada. I think it was a different approach to look at the universal divine. Nonetheless, it is in front of us. And it makes it more interesting because you linked it with the today's issues which is happening all around us. That makes it more relevant. Obviously, we all know Shivindo's and Mother's writing, everything is most relevant to our daily life. But nonetheless, it is good to be reminded through this the Darshan Days programs and talks like that. And I thank you for that. If you want to say something, otherwise, I think today's program we can conclude here.
Hey, Vivek, one request. Will you send email of this presentation to everybody?
I have recorded it. I'll send it in a few days.
Okay, that will be good.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd like-
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste. Very nice.
Namaste.
Very interesting.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Vivek.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Mummy, go. Arjun. Yes, we're done. Namaste, namaste, Lalit bhai. Chalo, okay.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste.